My name is Ameriquita Mariquita Solis, and I am the host today. And this is our second session of Joy and Freedom on the Vegan Path. My co-teammate, Bharat, from the Vegan Community Support Team is here also. And we are joined by our guests, Drs. Will Tuttle, PhD, and Gabriel Cousens, MD, who will guide us more deeply on the sevenfold path of peace, sharing how veganism fosters mental and inner peace. So, I'm sorry, I'm having some tech problems as well here. Okay, so before we dive in, I just wanted to have a quick say about founding heroes in the vegan community. And founding heroes are the heartbeat of the vegan community, people like you who shape our vision, fund our efforts to build a united vegan world, and it keeps us able to give these events for free. So if you feel called to lead the way, please email peterg@thevegancommunity.com or visit vegancommunity.com so we can work on this mission together to build the vegan world with confidence, peacefulness, and unlimited potential. So thank you for being here. Let us know where you're joining from again. And I want to introduce you to our speakers today. Will Tuttle is the best-selling author of books, The World Peace Diet, Food for Freedom, Reclaiming Our Health and Rescuing Our World. He is a trailblazing mentor who blends wisdom, music, and education to offer a unique perspective on holistic living. His work inspires a deeper connection to peace, compassion, and mindful living. Gabriel Cousens, MD, is a renowned holistic medicine practitioner, founder of the Holistic Liberation Way and Tree of Life Foundation. He's a leading author, internationally recognized spiritual master, rabbi, and expert in raw and living foods and vegan nutrition. So I'm very honored to be with you all today. And let me just say, I am a harmonic earth healer and a vegan empowerment coach. So being in this wonderful group really inspires me. So I would love for Dr. Will to start us off with the next delightful inspiration element.
Great. Thank you so much. And we'll be going actually immediately to Gabriel Cousens, MD, who will lead us in the opening prayer and a dance. I just want to let you know I'm just back from a 5-month tour with my wife, Madeline, and we're home in California. So I'm sitting at the piano here. I'm just changing it so you can see. I'm sitting at a grand piano, or Yamaha piano, and I'm going to play a little music. I'm going to turn it over now to Dr. Gabriel Cousens for the opening.
Okay, well, thank you, Will. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I'm going to start with a prayer merging the heart and the mind, and the heavens and the earth. And then we have this musical artistic team here with Will and myself, and we're going to give you a little concert, a little bit of a dance concert, because being vegan helps open up that artistic tendency, because your mind is lighter. So we're going to go for about 3 minutes of dance and piano by Will, and then we'll meditate for a minute or two, just to bring it together, and then we'll begin. So let's start with the prayer. B'Shem Kudusha Brihu Ushinate Bi Ilu Ilu Lihad Shemuke Bavavke Biyuda Shalom B'Shem Kozriel Kolam. Amen. So feel that merging of the heart and mind. Very good. Now I'm going to get back here and turn my screen down a little bit so you can see me dancing. Here we'll play. Now, are you going to time it or should I time it? Just gonna get the timer. Hey. Okay, let's sit for a second for meditation. Let me just focus on my eyes for a second. Let the energy build. And we'll go into meditation with a yod. Yod. And now, into meditation. Yod. Now slowly come out of meditation. Feel that quiet mind, and we get right into the discussion of veganism and the quiet mind. Because veganism, in almost all traditions, is part of the spiritual path. And one of the ideas is creating a quiet mind. I'm going to be explaining a little bit about that, okay? But first, I just want to give you kind of a history of how people even thought about nutrition. So we'll go back at 1780. This is kind of modern, beginning of modern thinking. What's 1780? Lavoisier, the Frenchman, said food is calories. And at one level, it clearly is calories. And then in 1847, about 60 years later, Helmholtz and Bruck and Ludwig said, well, it contributes to the physiology. It balances the physiology beyond calories. Another way of thinking about it. And then we go a little further, and we begin to understand, and this is the level we're talking about, that food has subtle energy qualities. Okay, that's, in other words, you can see the aura of food. Lots of pictures of that in my books and things. The food actually has an aura, particularly if it's live food. And it has a field. And there's an interaction of our field and the field of the food, and that's also part of it. So nutrition then has to do with subtle energies, not just calories or physical energies. Now, there's another step, is that we actually, I'm going to just say that, pick up the energy from the food in that way. We call it prana in the yogic system, chi in the Chinese system, ki in the Japanese system, mana in the Hawaii. They know it. People understand there's an energy associated with the food. But I'm going to go into, so it's a dynamic force of an energy that interacts with our dynamic force. Now, the point that's different here is that food contains thought forms. That's one step more. But you can't understand the importance of veganism until you understand that food contains thought forms. So let's start with the basics. An animal is going to be killed. It has fear. It has misery. It has pain. It doesn't know what to do, and it's blocked. And when we eat that food, those thought forms go into us and create an agitated mind. Well, in yoga, we say yoga chirti virti nirodha. What does that mean? It means yoga is quieting the activity of the mind. So what we see is that when you're taking in pain, misery, fear, you're activating the thoughts in the mind, and not necessarily positive thoughts in the mind. So we're affected by the energies, the thought forms in the food. So when you kill something, it's you're creating a lot of thought forms. But there's another point. We're affected by the energies in the food, but we're also affected by the people who are killing the animals. And if we look at the research, a lot of those people eventually got into areas of cruelty and suicide and things like that, more than the regular person, because they're caught up in the thought forms. So those thought forms too are in the food. So once you get this, it begins to get a little bit clear. Now the Bible is very clear. Bible is very clear saying, and I'm going to talk about dairy just for a moment to say that it used to be that that was included, but today dairy is so contaminated by the negative thought forms of what cows go through that we can't consider it kind of a high level spiritual food like it once was. Okay? So, but in the Bible, in Genesis, it clearly says, it doesn't say it in terms of veganism, but veganism is the best diet for spiritual life and living a holy life, living a sacred life. That's what it really says. Now, Pythagoras, in about 550 BC, went up and studied with the Essenes and Mark Carmel, which is not too far from where I live. And he came down and was really vegan and also began doing 40-day fasts. The point I'm making is he understood this whole thing, and what he was really saying, what he really said is that when we eat food, we tend to, from the animals, we tend to bring their tendencies into us. Now, it's a yoga concept too, which is we get the animal ego. Just kind of think about that for a second. So we're imbibing not only the thoughts of the animal, but the animal ego into us. And that can affect us. And it clearly affects our astral field. Again, we have pictures of it. People who are vegan, first of all, have a much higher percentage of being involved in spiritual life in a more deep way. But back to what Pythagoras was saying, and there's a connection here, he said, okay, when you're eating meat, there's a bigger tendency, okay, and Pythagoras talking about 550 BC around, roughly speaking, and the bigger tendency is to have more anger, fear, and aggressiveness, and murderousness, okay, because it decreases the flow of the higher planet. Now, in Ayurveda, hold on a second, there's three kinds of diets: tamas, rajas, and sattvic. The sattvic diet is the diet we're talking about. It's a vegan diet at this stage. 2,000 years ago, it did include dairy, but at this stage, it's vegan. The tamas diet is meat, junk food, all kinds of additives and preservatives. So that's a piece of why that's not so good. And so it creates sloth, criminality, and violence. So the point I'm making, it's really important to get, is that we are affected by our mind, which is what we're talking about, peace of mind, is affected by the thought forms in the food. Now, another great Greek teacher, Harada, has said the same thing. Violence, crime, religious intolerance, sexual imbalances, these are things he talked about. And he said, we really can't have peace until we stop eating meat. Now, Isaiah said the same thing. So I guess great ideas run in the same trend. Isaiah said in Isaiah 66:3, he said, he who kills an ox is like he who kills a man. He who kills an ox is like he who kills a man. So there's that violence. Remember I said two thoughts. The animal's pain and misery, but the thought form of the people actually doing the killing, that's going into it too. And Isaiah said we can't really end crime, war, hatred as long as we are killing people, killing animals for food. Okay, so we got the two thought forms, right? The animal's fear, pain, and misery that agitates their mind, and the person who executes the animal and the killing of the animal and how that affects it. Now, there's one other thing. In the Kabbalistic teaching, which like the the Vedic teaching, it talks about incarnations. And a very subtle teaching, but it's there. It's in the literature from more ancient times, or 1800s, not that ancient, is that it's taught that if in eating meat, and if somebody has retrograded in their incarnation from being a human because of their negative activity and their cruelty and whatever they did, they reincarnated backwards into animal world, and you eat the meat, okay, that has this person's negativity in it, you actually can be pulled down into their ego formulation. Now, maybe no one's heard about that, but this is a real teaching. Okay, I didn't make that one up, but it's a real teaching that you literally can be pulled down. So if a negative person has, by their negative activities, has gone retrograde and gone into animal world and have to do the work to reincarnate as a human, you can be pulled down to that, literally. So that's another consideration, because it's another level of thought form. And there's an interesting talking about how eating meat agitates the mind. The Russians did some research, not about veganism. They took people with schizophrenics and they put them on a water fast for 28 days, and their schizophrenia in a very high percentage went away. Well, that's interesting. More interesting is it only came back when they ate meat. That's a statement by what we eat truly affects our mind and even can activate schizophrenia, which is not one of the better states to have. So that's a piece. That was Dr. Yuri Nikolov. More recent research, like maybe in the last 30 years. Okay. And the laws of Manu, which are from the Vedas, basically said, by not killing any living being, okay, one becomes fit for liberation, because they're talking about what it does to your mind. So the kind of overview, just to summarize it, is that your mind is affected by what you eat. We got that. Eating vegan food is far more conducive to spiritual life and creating a quiet mind. Okay? But we're also saying that when you eat meat, you're eating pain, misery, cruelty, and the cruelty and anger of the person who kills the animals. And again, there is research in that. So what we're talking about is all those things are involved in affecting our mind if we're going to eat meat, fish, chicken, or dairy. So the most important thing for creating a quiet mind is going vegan. And so I'll leave you with that thought, is that now, obviously I'm giving you some ideas you may not have thought about or heard about, but these are real teachings over the last 2,600 years. And so that's what I'm sharing with you. I'm going to turn it over to Will now before we go into Q&A. We're going to go over a little bit because we had a little delay getting started. So Will.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Gabriel. I really appreciate your wisdom on that. And the quiet mind, I think that's something that it's really important for us, I think, as human beings today in our world, which is so tumultuous and chaotic in many ways. And we're being attacked in many ways also by poisons in the media and chemicals and all these other things, that we really do our best to take back sovereignty over our own consciousness. There's a tremendous move to take away our sovereignty, and so meditation is critically important. I think taking time every day to quiet our mind, to connect with the inner wisdom of our true nature. And as Dr. Cousens was just saying, this underlying cultural narrative of eating animal foods is directly against that. It keeps us frazzled and agitated because we're eating agitation. And I would also add to that idea that it's not just the act of eating and taking in the terror, fear, pain, despair, anxiety, and misery of these animals. They are not only raised their entire lives nowadays in misery, but they're also terrified when they're being killed. And as Gabriel said, the workers are doing that as well. But underlying that is, even more importantly in some ways, is that we will that, right? I mean, I go to the store, I take out my wallet, and I pay for meat, dairy products, and eggs. And it's that moment of paying for it, that's when I actually say, I want this. I vote for it with my dollars. I say, give me this. And so that sets into motion somewhere, because of my action, I'm causing violence, sexual violence. Animals are impregnated against their will. Their babies are stolen and killed. Their maternal secretions are stolen. Their eggs are stolen. They're killed. So I'm setting into effect tremendous violence. And then I don't just stop there. Then I turn around and I eat the violence, right? This is the temple, as Gabriel is saying, this is our body temple. And you would think we would want to build this temple with bricks of joy and freedom and love and kindness and caring and beauty, which is what we see when we go out into a garden and we see cauliflowers and we see apples and these beautiful creations that are delicious and sweet and have all the nutrients that we need to celebrate our lives here. And the problem is, of course, we're raised in a culture where the narrative is, from our parents and teachers and friends and neighbors and relatives and ministers and priests and rabbis, and pretty much everybody is teaching us to eat what we eat. So that's why we're doing it. So we're raised in a culture that we're eating these foods without really understanding where it comes from and the violence that we're causing and that we're eating. So the point is, if we can raise our consciousness and become conscious about what we're eating and take responsibility for the quality of our consciousness and our actions, then we naturally move away from that. So in my own case, I remember, I want to talk from the point of view of Buddhism a little bit, because when I was in college, I started questioning everything back in the early 1970s. And I discovered the teachings of Emerson and Thoreau and others in Concord, Massachusetts, where I was born and raised, which led me to Zen Buddhism and yoga and other teachings from India and China. And so I eventually took a long walk with my brother, a pilgrimage. We ended up at the farm in Tennessee, which was the largest hippie commune in the world at that time, and they were basically all what we would call vegan. No one knew the word back then. They said vegetarian, but there was no meat, no dairy, no eggs, no honey even, and it was for spiritual reasons. You know, this is a Japanese word, and they were based, actually, the farm was based really on the teachings of Suzuki Roshi. They were all students of Suzuki Roshi. They were practicing Zen meditation. And there's a word in Japanese that I think Gabriel, I'm sure, is aware of this. Shojin is a Japanese word, and it literally means the spiritual practice of eating a plant-based diet, right? It goes back hundreds and hundreds of years, not eating animal foods for spiritual reasons. So this is an ancient wisdom. And I ended up eventually living in a monastery in Korea about 8 or 9 years later in the early 1980s. And it was called Sangwangsa. It was a Zen monastery. And this Buddhist monastery had been practicing vegan living for about 800 years. So I realized that this is not a new hippie idea like we very often think. Being vegan is some kind of new thing. It's very an ancient wisdom tradition. And in the Buddhist tradition, I think it's foundational. Really, it's been watered down in many cases, but generally speaking, the Buddhist teaching, like really, I think all the teachings of all the great spiritual teachers was what we would call veganism. Ahimsa is the word in Sanskrit that means non-violence or non-harmfulness. So the whole idea is, if we're on a spiritual path, the fundamental teaching of spirituality is that there is one life living through all manifestations. There's one life living through all of us. We're all related. We're all interconnected. The more we bless others, the more we're blessed. The more we harm others, the more we're harmed. We got to understand that. Whatever we sow, we reap. The golden rule is universal. Don't do to others what we wouldn't want to have done to ourselves. We see Jesus saying this. We see the ancient prophets in Judaism saying this, we see Muslims saying this, we see Buddhists saying this, we see Hindus saying this, we see Confucianists saying this, we see Taoists saying this. I mean, all the traditions emphasize this fundamental teaching, these two fundamental teachings of non-harmfulness, don't do to others what we wouldn't want to have done to ourselves, and whatever we do, we will reap. And so we don't seem to understand that in our society. And we think that we can cause enormous suffering to millions of animals every day and somehow just get off scot-free and be healthy and happy ourselves, while these beings who we hold in our hands, we crush and violate and abuse them. So in this monastery in South Korea, it was basically vegan because of the Buddhist teaching. And I think it's maybe would be interesting to just read. I'm going to read something kind of short, but it's based on the Buddhist idea. Well, it's based actually on the Buddha's life and the Buddhist idea of nonviolence. And there's a wonderful poem written by Edwin Arnold. It's called "The Light of Asia." And it's a telling back in the 1800s when the Europeans first discovered the Buddhist teaching, and they went to India and they started translating these texts. And I'd like to just read from "The Light of Asia." It's very sort of old language. It's from like 150 years ago, this poem. But basically, it's the story of the Buddha's life and how he left the palace when he was a young prince. Even though he was supposed to take over his father's kingdom and become a great king, he didn't want to do that because he felt there was so much suffering in the world, and that he would like to somehow solve the suffering in the world for himself and for everyone. So he left home as a young person in his late 20s, and he went out and did many austerities and studied with many different spiritual teachers. This was 500 BC, roughly. So we're going back around the same time of Pythagoras that we heard earlier, 550 BC, 600 BC. And so before he attained enlightenment under the Bodhi tree, but just a few months before that, he was really very far along in his whole process. He walked into a town where there was a king, and this is, I think, is very, very beautiful story. So he comes into the town, and people are kind of marveling at this guy, this hermit who walks into the town. They can just see he radiates a tremendous spiritual presence. And he comes in, and there's a man that's bringing in sheep and goats to be slaughtered for a sacrifice for the king, so that the king will not can have all of his sins taken away by the sacrifice of the animals. And so the way the poem says it, so then someone told the king, there cometh here a holy hermit, bringing down the flock which thou didst bid to crown the sacrifice. The king stood in his hall of offering. On either hand, the white-robed Brahmins ranged, muttering their mantras, feeding still the fire, which roared upon the midmost altar. There from scented woods flickered bright tongues of flame, hissing and curling as they licked the gifts of ghee and spices and the soma juice. The joy of Indra round about the pile, a slow, thick, scarlet streamlet smoked and ran, sucked by the sand, but ever rolling down the blood of bleating victims. One such lay, a spotted goat, long-horned, its head bound back with munja grass, as its stretched throat the knife, pressed by a priest who murmured, this, dread gods of many yajnas, cometh as the crown from Bimbasara, that's the king, Bimbasara. Take ye joy to see the spurted blood, the pleasure in the scent of rich flesh. Roasting amid the fragrant flames, let the king's sins be laid upon this goat, and let the fire consume them, burning it, for now I strike. But Buddha softly said, let him not strike, great king, and therewith loosed the victim's bonds, none staying him, so great his presence was. Then, craving leave, he spake of life, which all can take but none can give, life, which all creatures love and strive to keep, wonderful, dear, and pleasant unto each, even to the meanest, yet a boon to all where pity is, for pity makes the world soft for the weak and noble for the strong. Unto the dumb lips of his flock he lent sad pleading words, showing how man who prays for mercy to the gods is merciless, being as God to those, albeit all life is linked and kin, and what we slay have given meek tribute of the milk and wood, and set fast trust upon the hands which murder them. So I'll kind of, I'll say maybe one more. It goes on. He gives this whole sermon or talk about how every creature loves life, and we take it. And then he says, while still our Lord went on teaching how fair this earth were if all living things be linked in friendliness and common use of foods, bloodless and pure, the golden grain, bright fruits, sweet herbs which grow for all, the waters wan, sufficient drinks and meats, which when these heard, the might of gentleness so conquered them, the priests themselves scattered their altar flames, and flung away the steel of sacrifice. And through the land next day passed a decree proclaimed by criers, and in this wise graved on rock and column, quote, thus the king's will is, there hath been slaughter for the sacrifice, and slaying for the meat, but henceforth none shall spill the blood of life, nor taste of flesh, seeing that knowledge grows and life is one, and mercy comes to the merciful, end quote. So ran the edict, and from those days forth, sweet peace has spread between all living kind, man and the beasts which serve him and the birds, and on those banks of Ganga where our Lord taught with his saintly pity and soft speech. So that's just a segment from the Light of Asia by Edwin Arnold. And to me, though, it's incredibly important because that's really where the seeds of veganism, in many ways, in our world got planted in a very powerful way by the Buddha. And you notice it was his presence that it wasn't just him coming along and saying something. It was his embodiment of compassion and kindness, which everyone could feel, that gave so much weight to his words. And I think that's a very important point for us as vegan advocates, that our words have weight and will help transform the world into a vegan world to the degree that we have done the inner work so that we are living a life of kindness and compassion for others, and understand and have more wisdom about our true nature. And so I think the underlying message here is that when this happened, up until that time, India had been invaded really by two great invasions. The Aryans from the north brought their cattle herding and their sky gods and war gods, and then from Egypt also they brought in the whole idea of cattle raising, and that was a new thing. But if you go back farther, in India, there was the teaching of ahimsa and nonviolence, and I think cultures were basically what we would call today vegan before the herding of animals started. And so it was really this Buddhist and also the Jains around the same time. Mahavir brought a similar teaching around 500 BC, and we see this whole shift in India towards vegetarianism. And then the interesting thing was that when Buddhism then went to China, and then from there to Korea and Vietnam and Japan and so forth, they never had cows, right? They never had dairy. They never did it. They never had that idea. So when in about 500 AD, when Buddhism went to China, they had a big meeting in China with the emperor and everybody, and they just decided that Buddhist teaching was what we would call vegan. Like no meat, dairy, or eggs, no animal foods at all. That was the practice. And to this day, when Madeline and I go to China, to Taiwan, and to Vietnam and to Korea, the monasteries are vegan. There's no meat, no dairy, no eggs, no wool, no silk, no leather. Some of the sutras, the Mahayana sutras, for example, the Shurangama Sutra, the Lankavatara Sutra, the Buddha specifically says in these sutras that we don't keep animals, we don't imprison animals, we don't eat meat, we don't wear leather, we don't eat dairy products. I mean, it's very clear, actually. And this goes back, a few thousand years, or at least 1,500 years. So these are ancient wisdom teachings, and then from there they spread into our society, like through the farm in Tennessee. I heard it. I wrote the World Peace Diet. Yoga teachers. I mean, the whole thing has been spreading, but it comes from these seeds of spiritually illumined people who could see the truth that when we sow seeds of violence and harmfulness in other beings, not only does it cause tremendous suffering to them, but as Dr. Gabriel Cousens was saying, it disturbs our mind. And our mind is our greatest friend, but it can also be our greatest enemy. And so if we don't develop a healthy relationship with our mind, and that's what we can do as individuals, we can work to build a healthy relationship with our mind. But the only way we can have a healthy foundation for this harmonious mind is if our actions are in alignment with the fundamental spiritual truths, which are far more important than any scientific truth, right? I mean, spirituality goes way beyond scientific materialism, which is based on this outer world. Spiritual truths go to the core of being, beyond just the physical level, to our true nature as eternal consciousness, where there is one life living through all of us, and that we are just inhabiting a physical body for a few short decades while we're here. We're functioning through this, but that's not what we are. And so once we get a glimpse of this, we begin to see the beauty and the truth in the great teachings of Jesus, as he was pointing to this directly as the great sages from the Old Testament, the great sages from Buddha, from the Buddhist tradition, from the Taoist tradition. There's the same thing. The universal principles that Lao Tzu proclaimed as well always were emphasizing the underlying idea of harmony, of simplicity. And it's very simple to eat plant-based foods. That's an important point. We can plant a seed and it grows, and then you plant trees. Like we have 75 trees. We just planted 2 trees yesterday. We planted a grapefruit tree and an apple tree. And those trees, as they grow, will give us so many apples and so many grapefruits, and they don't charge us. I mean, it's just an amazing thing. It's simple, it's basic, it's straightforward. As soon as you want to have animal agriculture, it's really complicated. You've got to impregnate them. You got to put fences around them. People try to steal them. You don't want to let them do that. You've got to fight. It's just endless war. I used to teach college courses in Plato, and Socrates says very clearly, 500 BC, Socrates says, well, if we want to eat meat, we're going to have to go to war. I mean, they knew that 2,500 years ago. They were saying that. So why have we made so little progress in the human condition? Why do we still have war and the violation of sexual integrity of children and women and each other, and the devastation of disease and conflict? It's because we inflict all those things on animals, and we don't see how it boomerangs back. As we sow, so shall we reap. So if we let animals have a quiet mind, then we'll have a quiet mind. If we let them live their lives in peace and harmony, then we'll have peace and harmony. But if we're going to aggravate their minds, right, if we're going to make them be upset and terrified and miserable, that's going to happen to us, and it does happen. So I think it's so liberating to be able to have these conversations and be able to contemplate the ancient wisdom traditions that are, and to see that our great, going way back thousands of years, in many ways, people had far more wisdom than we have today. And we have really, in many ways, been hijacked into a system and a way of living that is not in our best interest. It's in the best interest of pharmaceutical industry and weapons industries and the media and a few wealthy plutocrats. But we need to wake up and liberate animals from the point of view of a quiet mind. Quiet mind is only available to us when we are kind and loving to others, especially those who are at our mercy. So we can open up for questions. I want to thank everyone for your kind attention. We did start a little late, so we can go over maybe another 10 minutes or so. So Mary,
that was really nice, Will. I just want to add that Rudolf Steiner and Rabbi Joseph Elbow from around 200 AD, they said something very interesting. We're not going to make it into the Messianic age or the 1,000 years of peace until everyone becomes vegan. So they actually knew this from thousands of years ago. And so this is part of our work, is the uplifting of the world back to a vegan understanding of how to live in the world so we can raise the consciousness for the whole planet. So it fits in. And again, Genesis, it talks about, I've given you all the fruits and vegetables of the field. For them, for you it shall be food. So this is a message, that Adam and Hava, that's 6,000 years. So we have this huge history. The question is, which is how you were ending it, is how do we get back to the teachings that, Buddha and Taoist and biblical teachings that we knew and we do know. And so we're both calling for, we need to return to these ancient spiritual ways that can uplift the consciousness of the planet and create healthy minds that can vibrate with a higher spiritual frequency, and then that transformation is happening. So that's, to me, part of the work of the veganism movement, is to do just what we're talking about.
Right, and that's what I think. When you use that word vibration, I think that's a key point, because animal-based foods have this vibration of violence and terror, very low vibration. So when we're eating that, it keeps us at a low level vibratory of consciousness. And I think it's important, along with eating healthy foods, vegan foods, that we also do the inner work to keep our consciousness at a higher level, to radiate. There are practices, there's Buddhist practices, and all the world religions have these practices of radiating love and compassion and joy and peace out into the world, that we can live our lives to be, each one of us, be a radiating beacon of kindness and love in our relations with the people around us throughout the day, and with animals, and with all living beings. And when we do that, we create the foundation not only for a quiet mind and peace for ourselves, but on planet Earth as well, for everyone. So that's what we can do, but to actually doing it is, we're not taught how to do that. So I think it'd be good. Of course, we have these weeks ahead of us in our program to be able to go more deeply into how, these practices that we can do, and the attitudes that we can cultivate, the attitude of gratitude and of kindness and respect for others. But do we have some questions, Marquita?
Yeah, we
Anybody?
do.
But I'm gonna get, this is too tempting. Just one more comment. You know, you brought up the word, how do we do this? Okay, is really obviously key philosophically, but the most powerful way for doing it is a water or juice fast for maybe 7 days or more, because during that time we give up our addiction to meat, fish, chicken, and dairy. It's really easy. It takes 3 or 4 days, but 7 days kind of completes a minimum cycle. So we have the technology to do it. Now I see this happen because I do these juice fasts retreats. We are doing one June 1st in the Dominican Republic. And I see this transformation, and people just don't want to go back to it. They get the sense of the higher frequency, and they don't want to go back to meat, fish, chicken, or dairy. So that is a very, very powerful way to really, really make that transition pretty quickly.
Great, thanks. Yeah.
Well, thank you for this. I mean, it's very amazing. I feel very joyful seeing everyone here. I mean, you all are making such a big difference on this planet. And I mean, my heart goes out to every one of you for everything you're doing. Just your light, like our hosts here have, I mean, our experts here have said. I mean, that light that is radiating from you comes from the peace of eating the plants of this world, right? And so you all are the joy, and you all are expressing the freedom to let animals and to help our planet. So I want to just immensely thank you all for that. And I also want to remind you about it's the Founding Heroes program. And we really need your support to unite the vegan world. So if you're interested, please go to www.thevegancommunity.com. Again. And y'all, let's see. I know we had a question in the chat by Chapman Chin, and I was going to just let me read it quickly. Dr. Will, I've been reading your great book on food for freedom. I very much agree with you about the tension between spirituality and overarching culture, especially in Christianity. With respect to your book, Food for Freedom, the religious traditions, Christianity, Islam, and Judaism in areas more devoted to animal agriculture tend to be theistic and anthropocentric as far as the ban on killing is concerned, while the religious traditions, Confucianism, Jainism, and Buddhism in areas more devoted to plant agriculture tend to be non-theistic and apply to the precept against killing to all sentient beings. How is it that both modern communist China and ancient Confucian China, despite their historical emphasis on plant-based agriculture, have exhibited some of the worst treatment of animals in the world?
Yeah, well, it's like the whole world has been hit hard by the West. I would have to say. I mean, starting in the colonial period, the European, the Western civilization, which has, it's got a lot of good things, but it's a very meat-oriented society. And so we see it when we go to Africa, when we go to Asia, McDonald's, Burger King, Kentucky Fried Chicken, the IMF, the World Bank, all these I call it the military, industrial, meat, medical, pharmaceutical, media, banking complex. It spread throughout the world. It hit everywhere. It hit China very hard. It hit a lot of places. And so whereas Buddhists, like in Thailand, traditionally were always vegan, now they're eating meat, mainly because the French brought in the idea of eating meat, and only the rich could eat meat, and the ones that were honored could eat meat. So the people wanted to honor the Buddhist monks and say, well, we'll give you, even though we can't afford meat, we'll give you some. And so pretty soon, so there's this whole shift has happened in many ways away from a more kind, loving, caring way of being. And I think a lot of it's really due to the underlying assumptions of animal agriculture. This society that we're born into of might makes right, the domination of the weak by the strong. This is how our society, that's how an animal agriculture-based society functions. That's what it does. So we just see this in China now. We see it all over the world, though. It's not just in China. But I think it's somewhat of a perversion or an unfortunate consequence of the fact that huge amounts of power are concentrated in the hands of just a few people, right? You have centralization of power. And whenever you have centralization of power in the hands of a few, you have domination and exploitation. That's why, for example, in animal agriculture, you can have like 2 or 3 people, and they can completely control the lives of 1,000 chickens or 500 pigs or something. Because they have technology and they can centralize control. And so we see that happening, and there's a tendency to just use that to centralize control. We see that in our world today. In general, that we have to be very careful about losing our freedom as individuals because of the centralization of control that's happening more and more in our world. And what you just gave are examples of that. So hopefully that answers your question, I think.
Thank you, Dr. Will, and thank you, Chapman, for that question. That was a very good question. Also, I know that someone else had their hand up. I see that. So Andy, did you have a question? But I don't know if you can unmute.
There we
There
go.
she is.
Okay, I think I just unmuted.
You
Yeah,
are. You're
that's good.
unmuted.
Okay. So the whole thing with the killing and all of that, and I like that all that story that you were reading, Will. So what is it that this whole adrenochrome thing that they feel they need to intentionally go out of their way to torture the animals, or they're doing this with now, I guess I've learned.
With children, we're doing it with children too.
Right, with children, also with babies, but especially with animals, dogs, cats, everything. What is it they're getting? Is it because supposedly, we take in, what we're doing to the animals? Is it some sort of evil, bad addiction, like when people drink or do drugs? What is it that these people are getting that they feel they have to keep getting the same thing by torturing the innocent animals, babies, kids, all of that, and they're ingesting it, drinking the blood or eating the meat or whatever? Is it something that's like feeding an addiction inside them physically or emotionally?
Well, I think it's more than that. Okay. Yes, meat is addicting. That's a proven fact. Okay. Dairy is addicting. I write about that in my books. But what you're talking about is a little bit more on the demonic side of things. To be honest, torching and killing kids is not just, oh well, I'm addicted to this. It takes you into a demonic way of thinking about things. Now, what do we do about that? Well, they are, in a sense, looking for a high. Okay, and it's called lust. Okay, perversion and lust. Okay, so when your mind is clear, when you're meditating, when you're merging with the one, what happens is you're so far beyond that in terms of consciousness, you wouldn't even think of doing something like that. It wouldn't even occur to you because we have it all. So the spiritual practices that Will and I have been talking about here, that are really in all, pretty much all the traditions, take you way above the hit you get from, torching a kid and drinking his blood. You go way beyond that. Now, I've never done the other, but I'm sure you go way beyond, because that's just a high. It's like a drug high. That's actually what it is, but it's more perverted. And we need to maybe start to acknowledge in these kinds of practices that it's one step more than just killing animals. That people get something from it, and it, as I say, has a little bit more demonic quality to it that we need to acknowledge and start creating frequency of peace with the sevenfold peace, peace with the body, which we talked about this week, peace with the mind, next month, peace with the family, relationships. All these things elevate your consciousness. That's what we need to understand. And these people are lacking that and choose to go the other way, a more demonic way. So that's kind of a bigger explanation, because what you're talking about is really black and has been practiced by a lot by the English royalty and particularly in Europe, the different royalties and so forth. So that's what we're talking about. And it is practiced in this country, for sure, in America, for sure. So as we elevate the consciousness, we show people pathways to go way higher than just, getting a hormonal high. It's a serious problem. I'm going to be a little optimistic for people. And the scenes 2,000 years ago mentioned the first day of Pesach, which was a few days ago, that in 2025, that we will be in this next 50 years entering the 1,000 years of peace. So we're right on the cusp in the promoting the veganism to elevate people's consciousness. Now, this is the time. And we can't preach to people in a certain way, but this is the time to elevate consciousness. And veganism really, really does play a role in moving away from meat lust, animal death lust.
Yeah, I think I won't say too much, but that's really good. The thing is kind of interesting, though, when you look at it sort of chemically, what happens is when you have a fear, right, then adrenaline is released. Like if a lion is chasing a gazelle, there's adrenaline running in the gazelle, but it's only when the claws of the lion enter the flesh of the gazelle that the adrenaline is oxidized into adrenochrome. So it becomes a different substance. And that's the thing. It's the actual, not just fear, but the actual pain and that leads to that. And yeah, there is quite a bit of evidence that could be something that's part of the, as Gabriel says, the addictive quality of meat, of animal flesh, that it has this adrenochrome, which people are willing apparently to pay a lot of money for if you get it from humans. And because I remember, in Korea, the activists who were working against the Korean dog trade, making dog soup and so forth in Korea, which is considered something that's really important. If you're a man in certain segments of Korean society, you have to have dog soup every few weeks to keep up your virility. And the whole idea was they wouldn't just kill the dogs; they would like literally torture them to death because they felt that it had more. They called it yang energy. I think it's not yang energy; it's adrenochrome. And so that somehow they could feel it when they ate it, and it made it. I think you're right. It made it addictive. It gave them a charge of some kind. And but I think, as Gabriel says, it's demonic. It's more demonic. I mean, animal agriculture, eating any animal is already demonic. That is demonic, but it's obviously much more demonic to do it to other human beings, especially children who are completely innocent. So I mean, but it's ridiculous. I mean, the whole thing is so demonic. But we have to understand that we, in many ways, are born into a culture that is in many ways is demonic, in the sense that what demonic is, by definition, is getting what I want and not worrying if I harm others in the process, right? And so our economic and political systems, in many ways, arise out of that mentality, which is animal agriculture. That's the core. We're doing it millions of times every day. We're selling beings by the pound, and we don't care if they're suffering. I mean, that's demonic by definition. So what we're talking about is just rising out of this cesspool of horrific violence and demonic living into a basic human dimension. It's nothing to be proud of. It's just like, come on, wake up. And
But it's our work. It's what we're given. It's what we
Right.
have to do.
It is our work.
Is elevate consciousness. And the vegan, diet is a foundation for elevating consciousness. It is all our responsibilities, and it's our task, or it's our dharmic duty. Dharmic means to do good works to elevate the consciousness of the world. That's what's given to us. We got 50
Yeah,
years to get it right.
Right.
Time
It's
has
a
run out.
fantastic opportunity we have, really, and it's we should be very grateful that we can do this. Yeah, you're right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Andy.
Should
Do
probably
we have one more or no? I mean, do we have, or should, I know we've gone over somewhat, but
yeah,
Go
we've
ahead.
gone an hour
Go for
now.
it.
I think it's probably good to wrap it up.
yes,
But
I
we
think
can-
we
Can we
will.
do the one more just because I'm curious?
We can
All right.
Let's do one more very quickly, because we want to be considerate of everybody's time. And then, thank you. Go ahead, Chapman. You're muted. Let's see.
Yes, sorry. Thank you, Will, for your answer. I agree with you that meat eating is demonic because, for example, St. Peter in Clementine, in homilies, say that it's the table of the devil. My question is, even ancient Confucian China treated animals much more or worse than other countries and other cultures. For example, there is a traditional Chinese idiom that anything with four legs are eatable. And in modern China, of course, there are no animal rights law at all, or compared with the West. So this Confucianism, in a sense, seems worse than Christianity, as misinterpreted by St. Paul.
Well, I think there is changing, though, because, for example, I went to China a few years ago, and I gave a lecture in Chufu, which is south of Beijing, and it's where Confucius lived, and so it's a United Nations World Heritage Site. The Confucius teachings are there. The Confucian, his saying, Confucius say, do to others what you wouldn't want to have done to yourself. And then after that, we gave a lecture in a community that is being formed based on Confucian principles, and they explained to us very clearly that Confucian principles means you live a vegan life. There was no meat, no dairy, no eggs, it was all veganic, no bone meal, no blood meal, no manure, and they had a big community. I mean, they were building schools and retirement centers and houses and all these things, all based on the Confucian principles of respect for animals, respect for nature, respect for the elders, respect for children. So I think the ideal is compassion for and respect for all. That's the ideal. Whether it's actually practiced, how much it's practiced, of course, is the question. But the teachings themselves, I think, are pretty clear. And it's so much of it is just is social. It's cultural. It's like kids learn from their parents. that you can eat anything whose backbone is to the sun, like you say. You can eat whatever it is; it's okay. And so I think, but when we were in China, we also met with a lot of animal rights activists and vegans who are working hard to bring more compassion and pass laws and so forth to reduce the amount of animal foods being eaten. And I remember also that the Chinese government was officially saying that people should reduce the amount of meat they're eating because it's bad for the environment and it's bad for their health. And so they were promoting eating less meat. The government was. When we were there in 2000 and between 2015, 16, 17, 18, 19, we went there about 4 or 5 times. So I think there's a lot of movement. I mean, there's a tremendous, I gave lectures all over China promoting veganism to thousands of people, sometimes millions when they were streamed. And traditional, these traditional gatherings they would have where they have meeting houses for traditional people. Buddhists would put on huge gatherings to promote veganism. So I was thinking when I came back here, gosh, I go to China, the main religion in that country is promoting veganism. I come back here, they're not doing that here. They're not promoting veganism. They're not paying me to come and give lectures promoting veganism like they did in China. And in Taiwan, they really are. I mean, Taiwan is probably the most vegan country in the world. We get 2,000 people came to just hear a lecture promoting veganism, which would never happen. So I think there's a deep foundation in China. And it was very strong when I was there. I haven't been there since COVID, but before that, it was great to see. So I think, the most important thing is to just, wherever we are, like Gabriel said, just do our best. That's our calling. And to try to reinforce the positive teachings and be positive, encourage each other to do the best we can, to do the inner work as well as the outer work.
So I
Thanks for the
also
question.
stayed at a Shaolin temple a little bit, also was at Taiwan, and they're definitely open to veganism. It was very easy to get vegan food, and at the Shaolin community, you could get the vegan food. So I think it's more widespread than you may think. Just throwing that out.
Thank you, everyone. It's been
Okay.
great.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Will.
So
Thank you,
we thank
Gabriel.
you all for attending, and next month, whatever that time is for next month, the
Third Wednesday.
third
Third Wednesday.
Wednesday,
Yeah.
we'll be speaking about veganism in the family and intimacy capacity. So stay tuned. We'll see you then. That's great to share with everybody. And I want to thank the vegan community for doing such good work.
Right. Yeah. It's a
Yeah,
great new platform to support this for sure.
And for people to think about being vegan heroes,
Right.
right.
you
Yeah.
can,
Yes, our Founding Heroes programs are what keeps this alive. So please check it out at the vegan community. Wow, this has been inspirational. So thank you all so much. Everyone here is making a big difference. And don't ever think that your work doesn't count. And don't ever think that you shouldn't be celebrated, because I am here to celebrate everyone on this screen, all of these beautiful vegans. You're making a difference. And I feel it in my heart. And I'm sending love to you all. Thank you so much for joining this beautiful event. And we'll see you next month.
blessings and love to everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
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 Take care and blessings for a good month.